So glad that you're here. If you've had a long day, I'm especially glad that you're here. You've decided to put things first that are important, and so thankful for that. It's a great encouragement to have you here with us tonight, and so I hope that the class will be rewarding for you. I do invite your comments, as always, so raise your hand. Sometimes I'm not trying to ignore anybody. I just don't look out far enough, and so wave at me if you'd like to make a comment. I'll do my best to call on you. I've asked our brother Ben to lead us in a prayer before we begin. Ben, if you wouldn't mind doing that.
Be fruitful, Father, to do your will, to love one another, to serve you, to worship you on a daily basis. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
We're going to pick up where we left off there in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 11 through 12 is kind of where we got cut off abruptly last week without me knowing that the bell was not ringing. We've learned a lot from Solomon, learned a lot about a variety of things, and this is really hopefully opening our eyes to what life is truly about, what can truly be accomplished under the sun, and what we will find out in the next couple of chapters and next couple of weeks what our true purpose in life is, even after all of this experimentation here that Solomon has done. I'd like to read verses 11 and 12. It says here, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. For man also does not know his time, like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls suddenly upon them. This time and chance happens to them all is very important in our study of Ecclesiastes. Solomon's not stating a rule here. For example, the race is not always to the swift. We cannot always count on the expected to always occur. So unexpected events and unforeseen circumstances can and often do happen and affect people in unexpected ways. Jeremiah warns the people of Israel and us indirectly in Jeremiah 9:23 through 24. Let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches. But let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. The race is not swift. It's not always won by the fastest runner. How can this be so? How can the race not always be won by the fastest, the most swift? How is that possible?
Things happen right out of your control. The fastest runner trips.
Yeah. Yes. The fastest runner may trip. Someone interferes with the fastest runner. The fastest runner might get sick. He may not be on his game that day. A wide variety of things can happen. He might fall in the race. Yes, brother. So maybe the fastest runner just didn't put in the time this time to get ready for the race. He's the fastest when he puts in the time. There's a lot of contingencies here. Also, he talks about the battle not being to the strong. How can this be so? The strong man, wouldn't he naturally win the battle? Why would he not win? Well, the fighter may not have the same weapons available, right? May not have the same resources. Kind of makes me think of that old scene from the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the very talented fighter in the Middle East is approaching Harrison Ford and his character, and what does he do? He's obviously not the strongest of the two or the most skilled, but he's got the gun, and so he pulls out and he wins. He may not have been the strongest, but he had more weaponry. He had more, at his disposal to use. Weather might have dramatic effect on battles, things that can't be changed by men. It's not controllable. We can't control the weather. Wars have been won based on weather-related events in the past. So think about biblically, David and Goliath. What a contrast. Who would you have thought would win? Goliath. Now, in that case, God was the differentiator, right? He was the one who made that happen. It wasn't a contingency. Gideon and his 300 men winning against the thousands of Midianites. God was the differentiator there as well. It wasn't time or chance. But again, it didn't go to the strong. It went to the weak in that case. So not always does the battle go to the strong. What about this idea of the bread is not to the wise? What does it mean? What does that even mean, bread is not to the wise? First of all, what is he talking about here? Yeah.
Talking about the fact that just because someone's wise doesn't necessarily mean they have all the provisions that he needs or desire.
Yeah, I think that's what it means too. One who's very wise might find himself living in poverty. How could that be? A wise man living in poverty. How can that be so? Well, wisdom doesn't always belong to someone who is without physical disabilities, is it? You could be physically disabled and unable to work and do other things, but be incredibly wise. You may have lost your ability to speak due to a stroke, yet extremely wise. You might be unable to work the way you could before. Happenstance came upon you. Things that occurred in your life have sapped all of your resources and wealth in some way or another. The most wise man can also be taken over by force, can't he? A wise man can be physically overcome by a strong man and all of his belongings taken away. Doesn't mean he was foolish. He was overpowered. Opportunities may not exist in one society to gain what is needed. I think of many likely very intelligent people in communist countries. They can't accumulate anything. They don't have enough water. I think about our brethren, possibly in Zimbabwe, who could be very wise, yet they don't have enough water because of rain. It's out of their control, yet they find themselves lacking. I tell you, when I read these, first three here, the race is not to the swift, it's not to the strong, and it's not always to the wise. Bread is not to the wise. This can be any of us, right? This isn't speaking to specific people. This can be any of us. This is widely applicable. This other one, riches not to men of understanding. Riches don't necessarily belong to those who have understanding and wisdom. Someone can be at the right place, the right time, and acquire great wealth. And another may not be at the right place at the right time and may not gain wealth. So, one can have a great product and a market doesn't want the product. They're not receptive to it. Favor, not to men of skill, is another one that Solomon says here. One who has great skill may not always be able to use that skill to one's advantage. Yeah.
God's help.
Well, God is going to provide our needs, but he didn't ever promise us riches, right? We have riches in heaven, and he's going to take care of us well. But certainly this is speaking to things that are limited under the sun, what you can accomplish here in this life based on your abilities and circumstances. I think of my grandfather, who I never knew. He died before I was born. And my father and all who knew him tell me of incredible skill that he had and artistic ability. He could draw anything. He'd just look at a person and make a perfect replica of them in a sketch or a drawing or a painting or whatever. And he was a strong man. He was 6'4", brawny. He worked as a welder and a sign painter, as you might imagine, with that ability to support his family. But he struggled his entire life to meet the needs of his family. He had a young boy who was deaf. My uncle is deaf. And he didn't advance in his career before his life was snuffed out when he was 49 of a heart attack. Now, How is that fair? It's not about fairness. It's about happenstance. It's about circumstance. It's about things that can come about that are outside of your control. So those who are best suited to do a particular job are not always the ones who possess those jobs, are they? It's not always that way. I think if we're just brutally honest with ourselves and we look in the mirror, we realize that, things have happened that have benefited us or caused loss that weren't directly a result of our effort. So we're blessed in ways, and sometimes we have to suffer in ways that we can't quite understand and we didn't quite bring upon ourselves. Solomon observes this very important, I think it's one of the most important concepts in the book to me, in verse 11 here, where he says that time and chance happens to them all. I remember studying this for the first time in my mid-20s. I'd never read this book before at that time, and the teacher was bringing this out. And I tell you what I came away with, I always felt like I had more control over my life before that than I did after that. I thought, wow, I sure thought I had a lot more, I was in control of a lot more, and I could make my future the way I wanted it to be. But time and chance happen to them all. So we're all subject to the limitations of time, and we're all susceptible to the randomness of life. No matter who you are, no matter what you do to prepare, no matter what abilities you may have. I think of our dear brother Brandon. He was struck by a bus a few years ago while he was taking the bags out of his trunk at the airport. What was he doing that made it deserving of that moment in his life? To completely ruin some of the bones and joints in his legs. I asked him if I could use him as an example. He knows I was going to talk about it. So I'm not embarrassing him. He knows it. But it forever changed some of his abilities to do things. And it ultimately led to a freak accident last year that would not have occurred if that wouldn't have happened prior. It's a forever thing for Brandon in his physical life that he struggles with to think, why me? Right? Why did this happen to me? Why did that person have to do that to me? Well, I think about my mother-in-law. She's got Alzheimer's. Why her? Why her? The wife of a preacher for decades, devoted her life to serving others, and why her? The regulations of the government dramatically affecting my career in times past. Why me? Why those hardships? Christy, she had ovarian cyst a few years ago, required urgent surgery. Why her? Why did that happen to her? I mean, what? There's no reasonable explanation. Life is full of inconsistencies, it's full of risk, it's full of things that we cannot control. And you can create your own list. You think about it. Create your own list of seemingly random events that have affected you and those that you love. Those events are not, to my knowledge, many times determined by the wisdom that you and I possess or the way that I live my life. They're random, associated with living under the sun. So that has helped me deal with certain things in my life, and I hope it helps you to realize that not everything I've caused. Now, when I sin and when you sin, you bring about things on your life that are negative. That's just a given. There's consequences. But not everything is a consequence of sin. So when someone's struggling, we ought not to look down on them. Oh, they brought that on themselves. No, not always. Not always. It should give us a heart of compassion for other people. Any comments about that before we move on here? Probably I kind of harked on that enough. We see here in Ecclesiastes 9:12 that there's a simple truth that we do not know and cannot know the exact time or method of our death either. I don't know exactly when I'm going to die. And our death could suddenly fall upon us like it did my grandfather. He didn't go to bed that night thinking that was his last night. He went to bed and he woke up, went to the bathroom and died. It likens our death to a fish taken in a cruel net or a bird caught in a snare. Is that how we think about our demise? It's going to happen suddenly, possibly? We're not going to know. The bird and the fish, they didn't realize they were going to soon be captured and then eaten. They happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let's look at Ecclesiastes 9:13. Ecclesiastes 9:13 through 18 It says, "This wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it, besieged it, and built great snares around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city, yet no one remembered that same poor man. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised. And his words are not heard. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." So what observations does Solomon make about the value of wisdom here in these passages? What observations does he make about its value?
Well, better to be wise than be strong.
Mm-hmm. Better to be wise than strong. Now, it doesn't mean that the wise is always going to win, but it's better to be wise than strong. What else might you note here? Yeah.
Sometimes wisdom offered, although it's true wisdom, is not really appreciated.
Yes. Yeah, so sometimes wisdom is offered but not appreciated or listened to. Why? What's causing that wisdom not to be listened to in this example? What do you think? What do you think is interfering with the deliverance of that wisdom? Pride? In what way?
You could have a poor man who, by his wisdom, delivers the city.
Yeah.
The one in power, they're going to give the power to the ruler of the city or the king. I did this. He wants to take credit for it himself. The poor man is over here.
So, position and power play a part. And he's poor. So, lack of resources, lack of position of power, even though he's wise, there are few listeners. So, what does he say? We need to listen to the wisdom as it's spoken quietly. Should be heard. We ought to pay attention to the wisdom based on its merit, not based on, hey, that man's a rich man. I need to listen to him. That man is powerful. I need to listen to him. He's got authority or position. He must be wise. The two are not always the same. You can't say a rich man, a well-dressed man, a guy who's got all the toys, whatever it is, he's wise. Remember we talked about time and chance happening to them all? Someone could acquire wealth through no wise action whatsoever. And it would be a loss for us to confuse those things together. So the words of the wise should be heard, and we ought to value wisdom, not judge unrighteously based on superficial things like the world does. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. Just think about it. Diplomacy, handled by a wise man, can prevent a war, right? It can. It can work. And this would be a better outcome for both sides in something like that, because war always causes losses on everybody's side. There are no true winners at the end that have lost nothing in most wars or battles. The last part of it talks about one sinner destroying much good. How would that be the case? How would one sinner be able to destroy so much good? It's just one sinner. So how can that happen?
Look at Adam and Eve. That wasn't an army. That wasn't an entire clan of people, or 75, 89, it was one person.
Sin has consequences that can be severe. And one evil family member even can cause so much sorrow for the rest of the family, right? One brother or sister in Christ that is bent on evil can cause so many problems and issues, right? It doesn't take a lot of sin to create a destruction of something that is good. Can you imagine how quickly it would be that someone could destroy all of the unity, all of the peace that we enjoy in God's Word, all of the fellowship that we have? It wouldn't take much sin to really rock that to its core. And I think that's what it's talking about. It doesn't take much, and it can be destructive. I'd like to move into chapter 10. That's really our core text for tonight. And this one I've entitled, Wisdom is Better Than Folly. Wisdom is not ultimately satisfying. It's not perfection, but it is definitely better than foolishness and folly. And the the writer here continues to go down this path of giving us illustrations, almost like proverbs, for us to study and gain some wisdom from. And there's much danger in a little folly. In the first couple of verses in this chapter, Solomon seems to kind of lay down this principle that a wise man's heart will follow the right way, which in those times would represent the good and wise path, and the foolish man's heart will follow the left way, which is the less desirable, or the one that may lead to folly. This principle of following wisdom or folly is applied to several different types of fools, it seems like. In this chapter, we'll see the foolishness in rulers, foolishness in some workers, big talkers, and foolishness in those who are government officials. So in this very first verse, what is the comparison that Solomon's making, the illustration he uses about how folly ruins the reputation of the wise? What is this illustration about? How does it really compare? Joanna, you're smiling. I'm just going to start calling people who are smiling. Yeah. Yeah. So just a few flies in the ointment, and it putrefies. Ecclesiastes 7:1, a good name is better than precious ointment. And in Acts 6:3, who were sought out to serve the brethren there in Jerusalem? Men of good reputation were sought out. They were full of the Holy Spirit and wisdom. So how long does it take to build a reputation? A good one. How long does it take? Long time. It takes years most of the time to build a good reputation in any way, whether it's even in business, here among your peers and your family, whatever it may be. How long does it take to tear it down? Yeah, it could literally take a second to destroy your reputation. All the work that was put in to build it would be gone. I want to make just a couple of brief applications to that, and we'll move on. But this is such a problem in our society, and I know it's affected the church dramatically in many ways. And I'm not accusing anyone, but I'm just giving a warning to myself and to all of you. Men, when you have a stray thought about lusting after a woman who is not your wife, remember the stench of the dead flies in the perfumer's ointment. If you pursue this and sin takes you where you never thought it would take you, it will make you stink with a foul odor. It's putrefying. This is one of the concepts we discussed in our men's purity class a couple of years ago. And the only perfect woman to a man is one you have not gotten to know yet. Because as soon as you get to know them, they'll have flaws in ways that you never could have imagined, just like you have flaws in ways they could never imagine. So the perfect woman for you does not exist except for in your wife. She's perfectly suited to you, and she belongs to you, and you to her, in spite of all the imperfections that you both have. Was Eve perfect for Adam? God said everything he made was good. She was not perfect, though, was she? Can you imagine all the talks that they had following their ejection from the garden? Whose fault? Why did this happen? What did you do? Women, when you have a stray thought about gossiping about others or showing off your body in a way that is not modest and does not profess godliness with good works, remember the stench of the dead flies in the ointment. Don't ruin your reputation. Your reputation will stink with a foul odor. It's putrefying. That's what we're talking about here. That's where the rubber meets the road. Are we going to decide to put flies in the ointment, the precious ointment of our reputation, or not? Are we going to do that? I hope not. We've been warned. Solomon says it. It's true. It's wise. We need to learn from it. He says here in verse 2, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. Who is the fool here in verse 4. Who's the fool that we're talking about now? Who's behaving as a fool? Would you think it's the ruler that rises against you in anger, possibly, unjustifiably? Maybe. Could that be that of a proud, angry ruler losing his temper? You're under his rule. How would it be true that a fool would even reveal his foolishness here by simply walking down the road? How would someone just walking down the road reveal that they're a fool to everybody? How would they know? What would have to happen for them to know? Anything? Okay. So maybe the swagger and all that, maybe like, oh boy, he's just full of himself, right? Maybe. What else? How else would it be for sure known? Words. Speaking. You know, he's going to just spout off all his foolishness to everybody down the road. Oh yeah, let me tell you how to do that. I know how to do that. You know, it's just I know it all. You know, and he may be spouting off things that don't even make any sense. We're revealed by our words. People know what's in our heart through our words, and we can't hide it. When we're speaking, we talk to someone, we reveal whether or not we're a person who adheres to wisdom or someone who's foolish in what we think and say and do. The advice that Solomon gives us regarding how we should deal with a ruler who rises against someone up in his charge, calmness. Calmness, which may or may not warrant a response to the king. It may not be the best idea to get back in the face of the ruler when he's upset about something that you've done. Maybe justifiably so or unjustifiably so. That may not be a good idea. Accepting the rebuke of one in authority is showing respect to authority. And listening is a way of showing respect. Fools never listen. Fools don't listen to others. Yes? Great example. She speaks of Rehoboam and how Rehoboam listened to those that were younger and his friends and compadres, you know, and he didn't listen to the wise men and the people. And he ultimately lost the majority of the kingdom over it. It split the nation. That's where we have the split in the kingdom of Israel. Good point. You know, we may not always experience this from a king, but in our society, you know, I might experience this from a boss. I might experience this from my father, someone in authority over me. I might experience this in some sort of relationship that I am subject to another. And how should I handle that? I think we can make some application here to that as well. What's in our best interest may not be to rail against them. Let's look at verses 5 through 7. Verses 5 through 7. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, Solomon says, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses, and princes walking on the ground like slaves. So who's the fool here? I think possibly a weak and pliable ruler that allows these things to happen just unjustifiably. He yields to the whims of his subjects and he's just milquetoast. Doesn't have any backbone, possibly. What evil had the preacher seen under the sun pertaining to the government? The government is not immune to foolishness. And those who occupy seats of authority are not always wise. Roles might be reversed. Those who you would expect to have places of power or control sometimes don't, and others do. So the rightful claim to the throne may be treated as slaves. How would this happen in a nation? Well, those least deserving of the places of honor now have them. I think it's a weak ruler, a pandering ruler possibly. No matter what type of government, though, that we're in a nation or community, we have all surely seen those that should not be in positions of authority in them. And they don't really function well there, but yet they have them. So we shouldn't be surprised this is something Solomon observed, there are foolish people in high places sometimes. Comments about that before we go on to the next proverb. Let's look at verses 8 through 9. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. So who are the foolish ones portrayed here in general terms? Who are the foolish ones? Yeah, people doing their work, going about their day, workers, people going about their day. And so what are the four illustrations that appear here to help us better depict the risks encountering these ordinary activities of life? However, the question says it's seemingly more risky when accompanied by folly. So there's risk in anything, but there's more risk when you're accompanying that risk with folly. And I think part of that has to play here. So what are these four illustrations that are depicting this for us? Yeah, digging a pit. Maybe without thinking through it, falling into one's own pit. Is that where you see this? Correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me. I mean, it could be accidental, but maybe they were rushing through it. Slip and fall. They weren't paying attention. Who knows? How about breaking through a wall and not anticipating what may be on the other side or inside that wall? You know, when someone sticks their hand inside a wall without considering what's on the other side, that may be foolish, right? In our day and age, we may not think about a snake, but there might be an electrical wire in there. Get shocked or something else that may harm us. What are a couple of others here? Illustrations, that is.
Hurt by the stones that he's quarrying.
Yeah. I mean, that may be of no fault of his own, but it may be of fault of his own. You know, it may not be a good idea to be standing in front of the boulder when they're chopping off, the last little section. Like, yeah, it's about to come over, I'll watch it come down, make sure it comes down straight. I mean, there's some foolish things that you can do on the job. And then mishandling the axe, while chopping wood. You might injure your leg or other parts of your body. There seems to be a common denominator in all of these, hurrying through something possibly, or not planning something out. Maybe the foolish element of it. They seem like things that could possibly be avoided if they were thought through. But many things we attribute to luck or chance, of course, but they also have an element that would have been prevented in the use of some wisdom. So wisdom does have value. I think that's the point here. Wisdom has value in everyday things, but yet time and chance happen to them all. Watching Netflix while driving your car is not a really good idea. You might rear end someone, and you go, how'd that happen? Well, that was foolishness. There's risk while you're driving, but if you're watching Netflix while you're driving, okay, now you're really doubling down on the risk. All right, you're going to have an accident. The axle breaking on your trailer and throwing your boat off into oncoming traffic, not much I could have done to prevent that, possibly, unless you say it was not maintenance properly. That actually happened to my dad and my brother and I. And it was the first day of summer one year while I was in high school. And guess what I did the next couple of months? I fixed the boat. It had to be redone. All the bottom of it was just skidding along, right there on the road. Well, the axle broke. You'd never think the axle would break. Was there something we could have done to prevent it? I don't think so. So again, things can happen, but we can exacerbate those risks too. Let's look at Ecclesiastes 10 through 15. If the iron is blunt, this is speaking of the axe, the cutting end of the axe, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil, madness. A fool multiplies his words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. So who are the ones described as the foolish ones here? Those who are not working smart. They're using a dull axe to chop wood. It's just making their work so much harder. The snake charmer, He hurriedly tried to make his money without first charming the snake. That's not smart. The destructive talker, the unreasonable talker, the uncontrolled talker, the boastful talker, these are the foolish ones. So, how does folly complicate life? How does folly complicate life? Yeah.
Chance bad luck can happen to anybody, but folly going to multiply your odds.
Yes. Yeah, it's a multiplier in the wrong direction. So the more folly you got going on, the worse things are going to go. That contingency thing, it's not so much contingent as you just begging for it now, you know. You're begging for something bad to happen. What else? What else do we see that folly does to complicate life? Yes.
Relates to the idea of reputation we were talking about earlier. Sometimes just one bad action, you never outlive that. It's always, you're remembered for that one thing, no matter what's good or like.
Yeah. It's a complicating thing. It's hard to get rid of history. You know, your past, it's hard to shake it. What people know of you, what they know about you, it's hard to get rid of that, isn't it? So that's complicating. It may complicate things in ways that we couldn't have imagined. What else might you think of? Yeah, Lori?
I think about some of the middle school boy stories I've heard for the past 3 years. Kids that my boys knew. And my son came home, Bill came home last year and said, so-and-so can't play football anymore. I said, well, why not? And he's like, he got bit by a snake. And I was like, oh my goodness. Where did he get bit by the snake? And he said, in the hand. And I said, well, what kind of snake was it? Well, copperhead. Well, he decided to pick it up. Because he got bit and his hand's black, and now he can't play football and stuff. So idea the injuries that can come.
Yes.
Idea is that who thought it was a great idea to pick up a copperhead and look at it,
I can't help but think of Stu Kosman's commencement speech at Florida College that year. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and he goes through his top 10 ER visit things. You know, it is. If you haven't seen it, it's probably still up somewhere. You got to listen to this thing. It is. It's like really. Oh man, I tell you, you must see so much of this. Where you go, really? What were you thinking? About doing that. So folly makes life hard. That's the point. Folly makes it hard. It's harder. It's harder to chop wood with a dull axe. It just makes life hard. It's unnecessary hardness. Have you known of yourself or myself or others to complain, and they're complaining about their life, but they're doing it to themselves? And you just, what are these people thinking? Yeah, of course your life's going to be miserable when you get up to your eyeballs in debt. It's going to be hard. It's going to be much harder than it should be. There's all kind of examples. So why would someone not have sharpened their axe? What? Laziness? Okay, yeah, I think that's one of the key factors. What else? Yes, other things have you put ahead of it. Other things have taken precedence. It just, you can't squeeze it in and I'll just deal with it now. But if planning and prioritization, we could make it work, but we don't, right? It just makes it harder. Good point. What else? Why would someone not have sharpened their axe? Oblivious, just outright ignorance. Not understanding the tool that they're using. Not understanding how something works. I thought also someone may not do it because they may not have the grinder they need to sharpen it, and maybe they're too proud to ask their neighbor that has one. So sometimes it's just not asking for, hey, can you help me figure this out? Man, you're chopping your wood really easily over there. What's making yours different? And it's okay to ask advice of others instead of just, it's just going to be hard. I'm just complaining about life. Life's never going to get better, but I'm never going to find out why. That's foolishness. I think that plays a part in here. Folly makes life harder than it should be. Here we also see the babbler. And the babbler is compared to a serpent who may figuratively bite another person if not charmed. The babbler is dangerous. Babbler is dangerous. Lips of a fool will swallow him up. He makes claims he can't back up. He lies. He speaks things that simply don't make any sense. Foolish speaking leads to more folly, even the point of being described as raving madness here. A fool multiplies his words, making predictions or claims he can't possibly back up or bring about. Fools become wearied in their activities. They're not efficient. They don't plan by using wisdom, even to the point that they don't even know the way to their own city. They're so foolish. Where's the city? Well, back then the cities were, you pretty much knew that was the way to the city. Everybody knows that. It's not like trying to go to the 114 interchange out there where you don't know where you're going to end up. So foolishness ought to be avoided. Wisdom ought to be pursued. Ecclesiastes 10:16 says, "Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladness, life, and money answers everything." So who are the fools talked about here? The princes, those who are ruling at the palace and indulging in their position instead of providing for the people whom they rule over. Lazy or slothful people. When is there woe upon the land? According to this passage, when is there woe upon the land? It's bad there. What's that? The king's a youngster, or at least behaving like one, and he's just living it up in the morning. I mean, he's getting drunk in the morning. I mean, he's just a consumer. He's just self-serving. Well, how is a self-serving person going to affect change in a nation that's positive? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that's a common denominator among leadership. You know, selflessness has to be part of leadership. Sacrifices made. Other people's needs are put before their own to actually plan and use their authority and use their power in that position to affect positive change. Otherwise, it's not going to happen from the government anyway. When is a land blessed?
Things are done the right way by its leaders.
Things are done right. Disciplined leaders. People that are focused on their task, that are motivated to do the right thing, to put their own needs aside or take care of them in a righteous way. I personally think of our Governor Abbott. It seems like he's a hard worker. You know, that man's a hard worker. He gets things done for the people of the state. He lives a disciplined life by everything I can tell. He's serving people under his charge. It's a work to him. It's a work. Governance is work. It's not a position to be, glamorized and abused and a privilege to be taken advantage of. What is evidence of laziness and idleness here? What's the evidence of the laziness going on? The house is leaking. The house is leaking. The buildings are decaying. And, my brother always says this about his stuff. He goes, just a little bit of maintenance goes a long way, Just a little maintenance. It just goes a long, long way. But if that is put off, the inevitability is decay and problems. And did you notice what it takes to tear something down? At least something that's built under the sun. Just simply don't do anything. Just simply be neutral. Just simply decide not to act. Families can break down this way too. You decide to stop putting time into your family and your relationship, it'll just break down. It'll start decaying. You decide to stop putting effort into the relationship with your children, it'll evaporate. Possessions, stop putting a little bit of time in it, they'll rot away. So it doesn't take a lot of negative force, it takes a neutral force, and things will rot. Things are made to decay here, made to go away here on this earth. What observations are made about feasting, wine, and money? Feasting for laughter, wine for merrymaking, money answers everything. I want to ask you, how does money answer everything? Does it really answer everything? Is that the answer that we've been looking for? How does money answer everything? Somebody give me a brief answer. Or a long one.
Well, it can help fix some matters. It can help take away some burden.
I think that's the sense. You can use it to, take care of some of those contingencies, some of those things that you won't have to suffer in certain ways possibly if you have the resources to actually take care of it. So we'll pick up there when we meet next week, Lord willing. Thank you all so much for the class tonight. I truly appreciate it.